Have you ever wondered how a pet can transform someone's life amid grief and depression? Imagine a young woman who, after losing her mother, sinks into a deep sadness that seems endless. Years go by, and she struggles daily to find a reason to keep moving forward. Then, one day, an unexpected encounter with a dog completely changes her path, bringing light and hope back into her life. Stay with us to discover how the unconditional love of an animal can be the catalyst for healing and redemption. This is a story about loss, pain, and the remarkable strength of the bonds we form with our four-legged friends. Alice always had a very special relationship with her mother, Clara. From a young age, they shared a bond that went beyond the usual mother-daughter relationship. Clara was not only Alice's mother but also her best friend and confidant. They spent hours together, talking about dreams, fears, and plans for the future. Alice's childhood was filled with moments of pure happiness by Clara's side. They loved going to the park, where they had picnics and flew kites. On weekends, their kitchen turned into a baking studio, where they prepared cakes and cookies that filled the house with sweet, comforting aromas. Clara always encouraged Alice to follow her dreams, whether in painting lessons or piano practice. Clara was a woman full of life and love, always with a smile on her face and comforting words. She taught Alice to see beauty in the small things in life, like the sparkle of the stars or the sound of rain tapping on the window. Clara was also an unwavering source of strength and support, always present during the hardest moments, offering a shoulder to cry on and wise advice. When Alice began facing the challenges of adolescence, Clara was her safe harbor. She helped her daughter navigate insecurities and the pressures of school, always reinforcing how special and capable Alice was. Their nightly talks on the porch, where they shared their deepest thoughts, became a ritual that further strengthened their bond. However, Alice's happiness was abruptly interrupted when Clara was diagnosed with a terminal illness. Alice's world crumbled when she learned that her mother, her rock and guide, was gravely ill. During the short battle with the disease, Clara maintained her strength and optimism, always trying to protect Alice from the harsh reality. Clara spent her final days surrounded by love and care, and even in her weakest moments, she found strength to comfort Alice. She left behind a legacy of love and wisdom, but her passing was a devastating blow to Alice. Her mother's death left an immense void in her heart, a void she didn't know how to fill. From the moment Clara was gone, Alice was engulfed in profound sadness. Without her mother, life lost its light and joy. Grief turned into a depression that would accompany her for many years as she struggled to find a way to go on without the person she loved and admired the most. The loss of Clara left Alice completely devastated. Her mother's death was not just the loss of a loved one, it was the loss of her main source of support, love, and guidance. In the days following the funeral, Alice felt as if she were trapped in a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. The world around her seemed to crumble, and she felt caught in a whirlwind of painful emotions. Alice's grief was deep and overwhelming. She felt lost, as though an essential part of herself had been ripped away. The pain was so intense that she often struggled to breathe. Alice spent her days locked in her room, surrounded by memories of her mother, desperately trying to find comfort in old photos and personal belongings Clara had left behind. The house, once full of life and laughter, now felt empty and silent. Every corner held a painful memory, and Clara's absence was palpable everywhere. Alice avoided the kitchen, where they had spent hours together, and the park where they had picnicked now felt like a distant, unreachable place. Life had lost its color, and everything around Alice seemed gray and lifeless. Nights were the worst. Alice would lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. She felt a crushing weight on her chest, a mix of sadness and anxiety that slowly consumed her. Thoughts of her mother were incessant, and the pain of Clara's absence was unbearable. Alice often woke in the middle of the night with anxiety attacks, her heart racing, feeling as though the world was collapsing around her. Depression settled in insidiously. What began as deep sorrow turned into emotional paralysis. Alice had no desire to do anything, the things that once brought her joy now seemed meaningless. She distanced herself from friends and family, unable to bear the thought of socializing or explaining the pain she felt. Each day felt like a battle to find a reason to keep going. Alice's routine became a shadow of a life. She spent hours staring into space, unable to focus on anything. Grief had drained her energy, and even the simplest tasks felt impossible. She felt like a shadow of herself, living in a world she no longer recognized. Negative thoughts became constant. Alice blamed herself for not having done more for her mother, for not saying, "I love you," more often. She questioned whether life was worth living without Clara by her side. Pain and guilt intertwined, creating a vicious cycle that pulled her deeper into despair. Over time, depression began to manifest physically. Alice lost weight, her appetite disappeared, and her sleepless nights began to take their toll. She felt constant fatigue, body aches, and a weakness that kept her bedridden on some days. Anxiety attacks became more frequent, leaving her even more exhausted and hopeless. Alice knew she needed help, but she felt incapable of seeking it. Shame and the fear of being a burden to others kept her isolated. With each passing day, she sank further into her pain, feeling increasingly distant from the life she once knew. On an unusual day, Alice woke up feeling slightly less sad than usual. It was as if a small spark of energy had returned, just enough to make her get out of bed and consider taking a walk outside. After a long time, she decided to revisit the park where she and her mother used to have picnics, hoping to find some solace in the happy memories. Upon arriving at the park, Alice walked slowly along the familiar paths, feeling the gentle breeze and watching the trees sway. Every corner of the park brought back memories of laughter and precious moments shared with her mother. However, instead of offering comfort, those memories began to overwhelm her with an overpowering sense of loss. Suddenly, in the middle of the park, Alice felt her heart racing. Her breathing became rapid and shallow, and her vision began to blur. An anxiety attack was setting in, and she felt as though the world around her was collapsing. Desperate, Alice tried to find a place to sit, but her legs trembled, and she could barely move. It was at that moment of internal chaos that Max appeared. A thin, scruffy dog with expressive eyes that seemed to understand exactly what Alice was going through. Max approached her carefully, silently, and lay down beside her, pressing his warm body against hers. The immediate contact brought an unexpected sense of comfort. Max began gently licking Alice's hands, his simple, affectionate gesture somehow managing to break the cycle of panic. Alice's breathing began to slow, following the steady and calm rhythm of the dog. She looked into Max's eyes and felt an instant, profound connection. It was as if he was saying, "You're not alone." Max's touch, his calm and steady presence, helped Alice regain control over her breathing and her thoughts. The anxiety attack began to fade, replaced by a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. Slowly, Alice stroked Max's head, feeling a wave of gratitude for the unexpected four-legged friend who had appeared at the exact moment she needed it most. After a few minutes, when Alice finally felt stable again, she noticed that Max had no collar and seemed lost. Without hesitation, she decided to take him home, feeling an unexpected sense of responsibility and a desire to return the comfort he had given her. The first days with Max were a mix of adaptation and rediscovery. Now clean and well-fed, Max quickly seemed to feel at home. Alice, in turn, found a new sense of purpose in caring for the dog. The routine of feeding, walking, and playing with Max began to give structure to her days, something she hadn't had in a long time. Max was an affectionate and intelligent dog. He followed Alice around the house, always attentive to her mood and needs. When she felt sad, he would lay his head on her lap, offering silent comfort. When she had anxiety attacks, Max stayed by her side, radiating a calmness that helped Alice center herself again. Max's constant presence began to make Alice feel less alone. The emptiness her mother had left seemed, little by little, to be filled by this new friend. Alice started leaving the house more often, taking Max for walks in the park and rediscovering a new joy in these simple activities. Over time, the relationship between Alice and Max grew stronger. Max became a source of motivation for Alice, encouraging her to get out of bed every day and engage in activities that had once seemed impossible. Their daily walks in the park became moments of introspection and peace, where Alice could reflect on her life and her healing process. Max also brought Alice's laughter back. He had a funny way of chasing butterflies and curling up in blankets, making Alice laugh out loud, something she hadn't done since her mother's passing. These small moments of joy began to accumulate, gradually replacing the constant sadness Alice had felt. Moreover, Max encouraged Alice to reconnect with friends and family. Over time, she began receiving visitors at home and accepting invitations to go out, always accompanied by Max, who became the star of every gathering. Socializing helped Alice rebuild her support network, which was essential for her recovery. Max was not just a dog, he became a true therapeutic companion. He helped Alice face her fears and cope with the loss of her mother in ways she had never imagined. In moments of deep sadness, Max seemed to know exactly what to do to bring her comfort. One day, while Alice was feeling particularly melancholy, Max brought her one of the photo albums she had kept away. As she looked at the images of happy moments with her mother, Alice cried, but this time, her tears were filled with longing and love, not just pain. She realized that, despite the loss, she had many precious memories to celebrate. Max helped Alice open up about her feelings, both to him and to other people. She began writing about her journey, expressing her emotions in a creative and therapeutic way. This process of self-expression was fundamental in helping Alice find new meaning in her life. Little by little, Alice began to rediscover joy in the things that once brought her happiness. She started painting again, capturing on her canvases the emotions that Max helped her process. Her paintings, full of color and life, reflected the transformation taking place within her. Alice also became involved in volunteer work, helping at an animal shelter. She wanted to give back to the world some of the love and support that Max had given her. The interaction with other animals and people at the shelter further reinforced her sense of purpose and belonging. Max remained Alice's silent guardian, always by her side through every step of her recovery. He reminded her daily of the power of connection and unconditional love. His presence in her life was a constant source of strength and inspiration. Alice and Max's story shows us that even in the darkest moments, life can surprise us with small miracles. Max, an abandoned dog, became the ray of light Alice needed to find her way again. Together, they proved that the love and loyalty of an animal can heal the deepest wounds and bring hope, even in the most desperate situations. Sometimes, we pass by animals without giving them much importance, but they are living representations of God's love. In this story, Max served a clear and profound purpose from beginning to end, to be an instrument in Alice's life. The reunion with Max not only strengthened their bond but also marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. Animals have a transformative power in our lives, capable of healing deep wounds and bringing forth the purest and most sincere feelings. They teach us about loyalty, compassion, and, above all, the power of silent presence that often says more than words can express. Finding hope in the hardest moments is a challenge, but Alice and Max's story shows us that even in the most desperate situations, it is possible to find a glimmer of light. And often, that light comes in the form of a four-legged friend, a true gift of divine love.